preparing the live stream. Hopefully it just works. Sometimes it doesn't work. Cool, I think it's all good. All right, let me share my screen. All right, let's get started. So, just let me double check. Yes, working. Cool, I think. All right, let's get back to this thing. Where am I? Cool. All right, let's get started. So, last week I talked about verbs, and I gave you a verb overview, and we worked out that verbs in English are complicated. There are 16 verbs in English, right? And we looked at them. Some of them are more important than others. Some of them are more commonly used than others. There are some verbs in English that are hardly ever used, so they're not that important. But some verbs are commonly used and they are important. We will have a look at those verbs individually one by one. But what I wanted to look at in this lesson was active and passive sentences, which has a lot to do with verbs. Why? Well, I've seen in a lot of people's writing problems with active and passive sentences, mistakes with active and passive sentences. So what I want to do today is clear up some of those mistakes so that you can write passive sentences accurately, or you can write active sentences accurately. So let's have a look. So active sentences, well, we know this now. We know that subject, verb, object is the structure in English, right? And we know that the subject does something, okay? So the subject does something. For example, earthquakes destroy houses. Here's the subject, and it's doing something, and that doing is the verb, and the verb is destroy. Earthquakes destroy houses. There you go. So, but what you can do to make a passive sentence, you can switch the subject and the object. So let's look at this one. So earthquakes destroy houses. Earthquakes is the subject, houses is the object. We can switch the places. So houses are destroyed by earthquakes. The meaning has not changed. Earthquakes destroy houses. Houses are destroyed by earthquakes. It's the exact same meaning. All we've done is switch subject and object and change the verb a little bit, right? Why? Why would we do this? Why would we make passive sentences? What's the point? I mean, if our active sentence is good, why ruin something that's not broken? Well, firstly, you might do it to vary your sentence structures. For example, let's say you're writing an essay, and one of the ways that you get a high score is that you have varied grammatical structures. So, for example, in IELTS, let's say in the introduction, or just throughout your essay, you're writing active sentences. What you might think about doing is creating some passive sentences. Why? Because it tells the IELTS examiner that you're very clever at using sentence structures and you know how to use passive sentence structures, so your IELTS band score will increase. Same with the PTE. Also, creating passive sentences is a good way to paraphrase. If you're writing an essay and you need to rewrite the question prompt in your own words, you may think about turning that active sentence into a passive sentence. So it's a clever way to get higher marks in writing. That's what it is, right? But there's also another reason that we write a passive sentence instead of an active sentence, and that's to hide the subject, because the subject is not important, and we'll look at that next. And the third one is that, and this is similar to number 2, we want to emphasize the object. The object is more important than the subject, and we want to place emphasis on the object. So let's talk about hiding the subject because it's not important. Okay, so we've got subject, verb, object, but our subject's just not that important. I want you to look at this sentence. Just spend a second reading this sentence. This is a passive sentence. There is no subject here. It says, on December 31, 2016, a leap second was added to the world's clocks. Okay, interesting. Who added the leap second? It was added. Who added it? Who cares? It's not important. It's not the point of the sentence. So we've created a passive sentence because the subject is not important. A leap second was added to the world's clocks. Okay, passive sentence. We could write this as an active sentence. Fine, we could, but it's just not a good idea. We could say, someone added a leap second to the world's clocks. Here we've got an active sentence, subject, verb, object, and the subject is someone. But that's not important. So when we write this, we think, well, someone or a person or whatever is not important. Let's make it passive. A leap second was added to the world's clocks. And this is better. We've eliminated the original subject. And we've made a nice sentence here. Cool. Here's an activity, a task I want you to do. I want you to guess the hidden subjects. I'm going to show you some passive sentences. And I want you to think about why they were passive and who is the hidden subject, who is the unimportant subject in the sentence. Okay, so just type into the chat, who is missing here? This is the passive sentence. This is the good sentence. Correct. They're both correct, but who's missing? Who's missing? Type into the chat. You can just guess. There's no right or wrong answer. Okay, computers, maybe. The world, yep. Okay, government, a scientist, a report, people, says Raja Lakshmi. Right. Interesting. People, says Anu. Yeah, right. That's what I thought. There's no correct answer here, but I thought it might be people. You know, people generated 90% of all the data in the world over the last 2 years. Active sentence, it's fine. But do we care about people? Not really here, because it's not the point of the sentence. The point, or the more important aspect, is 90% of all the data in the world has been generated over the last 2 years. So what we've done is we've removed this subject, switched it around, written a passive sentence, and we've made this the subject. 90% of all the data in the world has been generated. Let's do it again. Who is the missing subject here? Nature? Yep, could be nature, Jason. Good idea. Government formed rivers 1 billion years ago? Maybe not. Evolution? Sure. Aliens? Could be aliens. Kings? Could have been the kings 1 billion years ago. God? Could have been God formed rivers 1 billion years ago. I like these answers. These are cool. Good. Habitants or aboriginals. Good. Excellent. Good ideas. Good thinking. Right. So someone or something formed rivers in India 1 billion years ago. Do we want that to be the subject of the sentence, the emphasis? No. So we put it into the passive. Rivers in India, because that's a more interesting subject, were formed 1 billion years ago. And the doer, maybe it was I wrote geological processes or the earth, something like that. That's not the point. So we wrote a passive sentence. Let's do it again. Good. Scientists, researchers, scientists, doctors. Good. I agree. Well done. Cool. And again, someone has developed a new vaccine. Do we want that someone to be right at the start of the sentence, taking up all the emphasis? No. So we write a passive sentence. A new vaccine has been developed. and we've deleted the original subject altogether. So maybe it was scientists. You could say scientists have developed a new vaccine, but we don't care that the emphasis is not on the scientists. The emphasis is on the new vaccine. A new vaccine has been developed. Cool. Last one. Here we go. Good. An editor, the editor, researchers, the editor, newspaper, journalists. Good. It could be any of those. It could be any of those. Well done. Could be any of those. So someone published the results of the study in the journal Nature. Is that where our emphasis should be? No. The results of the study, that's what we're interested in, were published in the journal Nature. So in the second passive sentence, it doesn't even tell us who published it. Why? Because we don't care. It's not important. It's irrelevant. Maybe it was researchers. Researchers published the results, but it's unimportant. So we just turn it into a passive sentence. So, cool. Active or passive? Now let's go a step further, because it's up to you whether you write an active or a passive sentence, and it depends on what you're trying to say. Sometimes either sentence will be fine. An active sentence or a passive sentence will be okay. That's fine. It's just up to you. Sometimes you really need to write an active sentence because a passive sentence won't make sense. Sometimes you need to write a passive sentence because an active sentence won't make sense. So what I want you to do now is to decide which sentence sounds better. They're both correct. They're both possible, but one of them will be more, the emphasis will be in a better position. Okay, so you need to decide which subject is better. So just write into the chat, active or passive. Which sentence is better? Just take your time, read it slowly. Cool. Most people, almost all of you, agree that the passive sentence is a better sentence in this case. And I kind of agree with you. Let's read them both. It says divers. So this is about divers. This sentence is about divers because it's the subject of the sentence. Divers have largely unexplored the almost limitless deep waters of the sea. This sentence is about the limitless deep waters of the sea have been largely unexplored, and it doesn't mention the divers. So I guess it depends on what you're trying to say. But for me, I think in this case, the passive sentence is better because, well, the divers is not the emphasis. The deep waters of the sea should be the emphasis. Therefore, the passive sentence is better. Let's try this one. Read it carefully. Cool. Almost all of you agree that I think it's the first one's more important here. Let's read it, the active one first. It says, for thousands of years, Mother Nature has taken the blame. So this is an active sentence where the subject is doing something or has done something. Mother Nature has taken the blame for massive flooding along the Yellow River. Let's read this passive sentence, the same meaning. We've switched the subject and object. For thousands of years, the blame has been taken for massive flooding along the Yellow River by Mother Nature. Well, whoopsie, that one is wrong. That should be not that. That's my mistake. It should be My mistake. This one is correct, not that one. Why? Because we needed the subject to be Mother Nature in this one, taking the blame. The meaning is better in this sense in the active sentence. Sorry about my mistake there. I didn't edit that properly. Right, let's clear those drawings. Hopefully the next one won't have a problem. Cool, please read this one. It's a bit longer. Specifically, people buried her or she was buried. This is where the active versus passive part is. Which one is better, active or passive? Cool, this one's a bit split. Some people are, looks like most people are into the passive sentence here. Let's read them both. When a let me just kill my video here. When a female Norwegian Viking died sometime during the 9th century, people buried her wearing a status symbol, a beautiful piece of bronze jewelry worn on her traditional Norse dress. Okay, so people buried her. Passive. When a female Norwegian Viking died sometime during the 9th century, she was buried wearing a status symbol, a beautiful piece of blah, blah, blah. So it depends. It depends. Is it important to have people buried her or she was buried? Well, I think the passive sentence is better here because people burying her is kind of irrelevant. The emphasis of this sentence is on the Norwegian Viking female, not on the people burying her. So as I said, it's a choice. It's a choice, but my idea is that one. Last one. Let's do this one. I think this one's clearer. Which one is better? Read it carefully. Which one has better emphasis? All right, cool. Let's read them both. Active. A major problem in seismology is that scientists are unable to predict when, where, and with what strength the next earthquake will strike. So scientists are unable to predict. Here, passive. A major problem in seismology is that when, where, and with what strength the next earthquake will strike is unable to be predicted. The active sentence is definitely better here. It's just clearer, okay? And the emphasis is on that the scientists are unable to predict when, where, and with what strength. So that's a better sentence there. The active sentence is better. Right, fine. So we've looked at active and passive, and we've looked at hiding the subject, and we've also decided on which sentence is better and whether you should hide the subject or not. Now let's think about the mechanics of active and passive and how to change active to passive. One thing you will remember from last week when we looked at verbs is that there are lots of changes. So for example, here's the active verb, just the normal verb. So these are just the normal verbs that you see, like produce, produced, past, will produce, future, is producing, now, was producing, has produced, and had produced. Now there's a passive form of the verb, okay? So every verb can change from active to passive, right? So the passive form of produce is produced or are produced with the ed ending, right? And produced, past, was produced, were produced, will produce, will be produced, is producing, is being produced. I don't want to go through because it's just too much to remember. Let's just look at some examples of this verb produce. So these two sentences mean exactly the same thing. And these sentences, the emphasis, it doesn't really matter. It could be active, could be passive. They're both good, right? They're both good. So the active sentence says, the UK produces the highest amount of food waste. The passive sentence means the exact same thing, but it's just subject and object is switched and the verb changes. The highest amount of food waste is produced by the UK. Produces becomes is produced, right? Just read these two sentences to yourself, please. Cool. So in terms of emphasis, I think both these sentences are equal. They're both good. They're both fine. You could write the active one. You could write the passive one. It doesn't matter. They're both good. The emphasis on the first one is on the UK. The emphasis on the passive one is on the amount of food waste. They're both great. Now, what I want you to do is to now turn this verb into a passive verb. See if you can do that. Good. Now, remember it's okay. I knew this would happen. This is perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. All right, good. Most of you are getting it. Most of you are getting it. Well done. Good. Most of you. Some of you have not. Cool. All right. So we've got earthquakes destroy houses. Fine. So it's in the present simple. Now, it's in the present. So let's just look at the answer. Houses are destroyed by earthquakes. Now, destroy and are both in the present. You need to think about that. So if you wrote houses were destroyed, no, because this is in the present, destroyed. It's not destroyed. If it was destroyed, yes, it'd be were destroyed and it would match, but this matches. And also the other thing is I saw somebody write houses is destroyed, but houses are destroyed. You need to think about how the subject, how many there are in the subject. Is it one or more than one? Let's do another one. Please read these two sentences to yourself. So the first one, the active one, says the UK produced the highest amount of food waste. The second sentence says, the passive sentence says, the highest amount of food waste was produced by the UK. These two sentences mean the exact same thing. The verb has changed. I want you to write in what this verb should be. Good, Prudvi. Good, Ashu. Deep, check yours. Is it was or were? Good, 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 good. Yes, everyone's got it. Well done. Shweta, you'll need to check yours. Good. Good stuff. Cool. So earthquakes destroyed houses. Past tense, houses were destroyed by earthquakes. These mean the exact same thing. Let's look at this one. Please read this to yourself and read it out loud. Good. So the active sentence says the UK will produce the highest amount of food waste. Active. Passive. The highest amount of food waste will be produced by the UK. Cool. These two mean the exact same thing. There's just a different emphasis here. The first one emphasizes the UK. The second one emphasizes the amount of food waste. Fine. Please change this verb. Good, Ashwa. Good, Jason. Good, Ashu. Good, Nizam. So you're missing a word there. Good. Well done. So KJ, check yours. Is it will be destroy or will be destroyed? Cool. So houses will be destroyed by earthquakes. Will destroy or will be destroyed? Same meaning. Look at this one. Please read it to yourself. This one's interesting because it's no longer produced, because it's the continuous producing, and then all of a sudden it's being produced. Whoa, this is a tricky one. So active, the UK is producing right now the highest amount of food waste. Passive, the highest amount of food waste is being produced by the UK. Same meaning, just different emphasis. This one emphasizes the UK, this one emphasizes the amount of food waste. The verb, this one's an active verb, this one's a passive verb. Please type into the chat what the passive verb is here. Good. Is it is or are? Good. Well done. Yes, sweetie Dark, that's right. Cool. Good. Let's have a look. So earthquakes are destroying houses. Houses are being destroyed by earthquakes. Are destroying, are being destroyed. And of course, we add the little preposition by. Good. Next one. Please read this to yourself. So the active sentence says, the UK was producing the highest amount of food waste. Passive sentence says the highest amount of food waste was being produced by the UK. Cool. Same meaning, different emphasis. Please type into the chat what this verb is. Whoop, you've already done it, Eshwar and Prudvi. Too fast. Good, Ashish. Excellent. Good. Well done. Fine. So earthquakes were destroying houses. Houses were being destroyed by earthquakes. Same meaning, different emphasis. This one emphasizes earthquakes. This one emphasizes houses. Cool. Two more. Please read this to yourself. So the active sentence says, the UK has produced the highest amount of food waste. The passive sentence says, the highest amount of food waste has been produced by the UK. Same meaning, different emphasis. This one emphasizes the UK, this one emphasizes food waste. Fine. Please type into the chat the correct verb. Yeah, correct passive verb. Good, Eshwa. Good, Sujaya. Yes. Good, Leary. Check your, is it have or has, Leary? One house has, two houses have. Sweet. Look at this. Earthquakes have destroyed houses. Houses have been destroyed by earthquakes. Same meaning, different emphasis. This one emphasizes earthquakes. This one emphasizes the houses. Fine. Last one. I'll read this one. It says the UK had produced the highest amount of food waste. The highest amount of food waste had been produced by the UK. Same meaning, different emphasis. Please type into the chat the correct verb. Excellent. Everyone's getting it right. 100%. 100%. And that's what we want. We want perfect grammar. It has to be perfect. In your first language, I'm sure your grammar is perfect or near perfect, 99.99%. Same in English. It should be 99.99%. Why not 100%? Well, even native English speakers make mistakes sometimes, and that's fine. Earthquakes had destroyed houses. Houses had been destroyed by earthquakes. Same meaning, different emphasis. Cool. Recap. So what do I want to show you this first before we do this. So produce in that active sentence becomes is produced or are produced. Produced becomes was produced or were produced, depending on how many the subject there are. Will produce, will be produced. Is producing, is being produced. Was producing, was being produced. Has produced, has been produced. Had produced, had been produced. They are the different active and passive verbs. Why do we change active to passive? Well, you do it to vary your sentence structures. You do it to show the examiner or the PTE computer that you're very clever, that you don't just know how to write active sentences, you also know how to write passive sentences accurately. But sometimes we have to change an active to a passive. Sometimes we just have to do it. Why? Because we want to hide the subject because it's not important, right? Sometimes you can't write an active sentence because someone killed somebody yesterday. It's better to say somebody killed a cat yesterday. It's better to say a cat was killed yesterday, right? Because we don't care about the someone. Someone killed the cat. Well, it's better to just say a cat was killed yesterday. So sometimes it's essential. You need to change active to passive. And we also do it to emphasize that object. We're not, a cat was killed. We're interested in the cat. Maybe in future when we find the criminal, we can say the criminal, Peter Smith killed the cat. Fine. Then we'll keep it as an active sentence. But while we want to emphasize that object, the cat was killed, then we use a passive sentence there. Cool. That's all. I hope that was good. Let's go to Q&A. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat. Anything about subject, verb, object, active and passive? Siku, please type your question into the chat, and same as Deep J. Type your question into the chat there. Very happy with you all. You all did that very well. Have been. Yes. So Shoba asks, is there the possibility for the verb have been? Yeah, right. So let's say caves have been discovered in Western Australia. Caves have been discovered in Western Australia. So that's passive. You could say some people discovered caves in Western Australia, but have been discovered is the passive verb. We're emphasizing the caves, not the people. So there you go. Yes, that's a very common one. we very often use present perfect. So scientists discovered a new insect, right? Sorry, scientists have discovered a new insect. That's active. To make it passive, we would say a new insect has been discovered by scientists. So yes, very often in present perfect. Leary says, what tense to use in describing a graph? Okay, whether this be IELTS writing task 1 for academic, when you need to describe a graph, or the PTE describe image, try to keep your sentences, well, no, it depends. I think in describe image, it's better to make active sentences. Yeah, it's definitely better to make active sentences and describe image just because they're easier to say. They take less thinking. And when you're speaking, because you only have 40 seconds, you must just keep your sentences active. So team A kicked more goals than team B. Okay, so, all right, let me give you an example for describe image in PTE. Let's say the graph is showing Manchester United and how many goals they kicked, okay? So an active sentence would be Manchester United kicked 90 goals in 2016. Or passive sentence, you could say 90 goals were kicked by Manchester United in 2016. The active sentence is easier, it comes to your mind quicker. In PTE describe image, use active sentences. When you're practicing, try and create active sentences. Now, for IELTS writing task 1 academic, it's probably a good idea to boost your scores to use passive sentences sometimes. Use a few passive sentences. So when it says the data below represents the number of ice creams eaten on a summer day, you could say something like, the number of ice creams eaten on a summer day is described by the following data, something like that. So there you go. Because you have more time, you can think about it. But while speaking in PTE, I strongly recommend active sentences. Park, in writing essays, what sentences should be used? Well, I think you should use a mixture. I think you should use a majority of active sentences, but sometimes I think you should write a few passive sentences. Yes, so Leary says that's why I failed. I used passive and it sounded more complicated. Yeah, not sounded more complicated. It's just harder to think of passive sentences. It's much easier to think of active sentences. Cool. Okay, Siku asked a good question. Why does Grammarly discourage the use of passive voice in academic writing? Because Grammarly is software and it's a bit, well, I'm not going to say stupid, but there are no set rules in language. See, the problem with something like Grammarly, it sees a passive sentence and it will tell you that it's wrong because every sentence should be active in writing. And that's just not true. Because if you have a sentence that requires you to hide the subject, then you must use a passive sentence. So I would say there, don't listen to Grammarly, because sometimes passive sentences are essential. Yes. Cool, that's all. PTE people, I will see you at 6 p.m. Melbourne time tonight for the listening mock test. IELTS people, hang around because Jamal is giving a speaking tutorial webinar at 4 o'clock. So cool. Yes, I'll see you guys later. Thanks very much for coming. Hope you learned something there.